I thought of her cold, lifeless body, of never being able to see her smile again or guess the thoughts of her silent mind. And although I didn't yet have a name for it, I could feel the emotion that was slowly taking over everything in me, feel it changing me. It was taking me farther away from the monster, and closer to the man I wanted to be. Knowing this was it, the moment of truth I'd been so desperate for all day, I looked into her eyes with all the love and affection that had been bubbling to the surface. And for that, I said slowly, needing her to really take it all in, I'd have fared better if I had exposed us all at that first moment, than if now, here, with no witnesses and nothing to stop me, I were to hurt you. Her expression was still unreadable as she softly asked, "Why?" "Isabella," I said, using her full name to make sure I had her complete attention. And because I'd been longing to see how it sounded coming from my lips. Without thinking I gave in to something I'd been wanting to do all afternoon. I reached up and ran my fingers through her hair, relishing the way it softly caressed my fingers. I smiled as my touch made her shiver, because I could tell she wasn't afraid. She was excited. "Bella, I couldn't live with myself if I ever hurt you. You don't know how it's tortured me." I looked down, suddenly nervous about what I was about to say. I wanted her to know, needed her to understand, but the words were catching. That same image that had haunted me for so long was now at the forefront of my mind, and I needed to push it away, to bury it for good. It would never happen. Bella would never be taken from me. I forced the words out, knowing they would give me strength to tell Bella how much she truly meant to me. The thought of you, still, white, cold. To never see you blush scarlet again, to never see that flash of intuition in your eyes when you see through my pretenses. It would be unendurable. With that I met her gaze, and all the pain I was feeling, all the agony I'd suffered fighting the monster inside disappeared. She was finally going to know. She would finally understand. "You are the most important thing to me now. The most important thing to me ever." I heard her heart beat faster than I'd ever heard it as she dropped her eyes down and looked at our entwined hands. My eyes never left her face. I couldn't hear her thoughts. Her expression was all I had. Although I was pretty sure the racing heart was a good sign. "You already know how I feel, of course," she said, still not meeting my eyes and torturing me in a new way. She was making me guess how she felt when all I wanted was to hear her say the words out loud. She wasn't looking at me, but still I silently pleaded with my eyes. "Tell me. Please, tell me. I'm here." Which, roughly translated, means I would rather die than stay away from you. She'd just told me quite possibly the most beautiful thing anyone in the history of the world had ever said. Yet she was frowning. And I was baffled. "I'm an idiot," she added. It sent me over the edge. I grinned, like the absolute fool that I was, and left in agreement, because her reactions really were ridiculous. "You are an idiot," I said, still chuckling, and relieved when she finally met my gaze. She was happy, confused but happy, and we laughed together, wondering how we'd gotten to this point. My eyes never left hers as I finally gave in and said the words I'd been thinking all afternoon. "And so the lion fell in love with the lamb." She blushed and looked away, and as much as I wanted to stare into her eyes forever, I understood that this was a turning point for her. Although I'd been thinking the word for quite some time, I recognized her shy reaction as I confessed my love. If she needed time to let it sink in, I'd give her as much as she needed. I'd give her anything. "What a stupid lamb," she finally sighed, and my grin only widened. Really, I was the much bigger idiot in this scenario. I'd brought this all upon myself, willfully putting myself in agony every day just to be near her. "What a sick, masochistic lion," I added, letting my eyes drift to the trees behind her. The sky was still bright, but I saw one dark cloud roll in, and I wondered if it was going to rain on us, here in our perfect moment. I don't think either of us would have cared. "Why?" she said softly, but then trailed off. I smiled because even though I was sure it wasn't what she was asking, the word made me think about all the reasons why I loved her. The sunlight bounced off my skin, casting prisms on her face, yet she smiled at me like there was nothing unusual about it at all. That was definitely one of the many reasons why. Yes? I asked, really just wanting to hear her perfect voice for a while. I felt like I had been talking all day. Tell me why you ran away before, she finished, and my smile disappeared. You know why? No, I mean, exactly what did I do wrong? I'll have to be on my guard, you see, so I better start learning what I shouldn't do. I wanted to scowl at her for managing once again to place the blame on herself when I was the one whose behavior was inexcusable. But the disapproving look I intended to give her got lost in a wave of pleasure as she once again reached out and stroked her fingers against my hand. This, for example, seems to be all right. I just smiled and let myself indulge a little in the feel of her touch. My voice was relaxed as she calmed me with her gentleness. You didn't do anything wrong, Bella. It was my fault. Always my fault. But I want to help, if I can, to not make this harder for you. Well, I said reluctantly, but unable to argue with her if she was set on making things easier. I wanted it not for my sake but for hers. I was more determined than ever to keep complete and perfect control when we were together, to never let her be afraid again. It was just how close you were, I sighed, remembering her breath on my hand, her face inches from mine. Most humans instinctively shy away from us, are repelled by our alienness. I wasn't expecting you to come so close. And the smell of your throat, I said urgently, the burn making itself known again. But I was in control. There was nothing for her to worry about, and I checked to make sure her eyes weren't fearful. Okay, then, she said, as if I were talking about something completely unimportant, rather than her survival. Then, and possibly the cutest gesture I'd ever seen her make, she tucked her chin, smiled and said, "No throat exposure." I laughed, deliriously happy that I was able to talk openly with her about everything now, even my repulsive longing to sink my teeth into her throat. It didn't seem to upset her or scare her. She was just as thrilled by my honesty as I was at finally being able to share everything with her. Of course I didn't want her to think she needed to start wearing turtlenecks every day, so I quickly clarified. No, really, it was more the surprise than anything else. Slowly, I reached up to touch the side of her neck. Her skin was so soft, so delicate, and I wondered what it would be like to brush against it with my nose. My lips. I would have worried that my cold touch would bother her, but she had been initiating contact all day. She seemed to like my touch as much as I relished in hers, so I left it there, feeling her pulse under my fingertips. You see, I told her calmly. Perfectly fine. And I really was. Even as I listened to her pulse race, took in her luxurious scent, I couldn't feel even the slightest lapse in my control. All I could think about was how I wanted to touch her more and make her heart race faster. I've never been more comfortable with her than in that moment, so I decided to test myself just a bit further. I knew I was incapable of hurting her now. The man was finally winning the battle with the monster. And I really did want to be closer, to feel more of her skin on mine. Sensing what I was feeling as she always did, her cheeks turned their familiar shade of pink. I wanted to laugh because it seemed silly to blush in such a moment, sitting in our stillness, just watching each other. But I also knew what I was about to do, and I didn't want her to be embarrassed of her reactions to me. I enjoyed them. They made her who she was, and they reminded me that at least some part of her longed for me as I longed for her. The blush on your cheeks is lovely, I said softly, and watched the shade deepen. Reluctantly, I took my other hand from hers and it fell lifelessly to her side. She didn't want me to let go either. It was the most amazing feeling to be so wanted. Eager to show her my intentions, I brushed my fingers lightly along her soft cheek. She sighed and I felt her relax beneath my touch. Encouraged, I brought my other hand up from her neck and cupped her face delicately between my hands, always aware of how utterly breakable she was. It terrified me, but also filled me the deepest sense of joy that she trusted me so completely. It fueled my earlier resolve and made me believe that being with her could really be possible. Be very still, I said, ready to test my limits but still afraid of my instincts taking over without warning. As much as I wanted to let her control everything today, this was definitely a moment I needed to lead. Even though it seemed impossible that I would hurt her now of all times, I wasn't going to take any unnecessary chances. I had to be in charge, just for these few precious moments. Slowly, so slow I wasn't even sure I was moving, I leaned closer to her. I kept my eyes locked with hers, silently reminding her not to make any sudden movements. My fingers were still stinging from the sensation of warmth where I had touched her face and neck. I wanted to feel that warmth on my face, wanted to feel that much more human for her. So I gently laid my cheek against her throat, taking one shallow breath to see how much more potent her scent would be in such close proximity. It was painful, but bearable. The thirst raked at my throat, but I was so happy to be touching her without her being afraid that it lessened the pain.